you too.
I see. Okay.
Close on Zoom.
Yeah, on Zoom, one never knows who is where and so on. So I am in Williamstown, Massachusetts, to make it clear. Okay, shall we start?
Yes.
Okay. So this time and next time is going to be where we explain what Nagarjuna is doing. So where we stopped is basically on the 15th chapter, verse 10, where Nagarjuna says, it's on page 161, where Nagarjuna say, it exists is an eternalist view, it does not exist is an annihilationist idea. Therefore, the wise one should not have recourse to either existence or non-existence. So this is the middle way. Things neither exist nor are they non-existent. And so this is what we have seen the first two classes. How does Nagarjuna use Prasanga style reasoning to show that things neither exist nor not exist? And so the whole question is, what does it mean? And so it's important, these two steps. It's important to understand the kind of Prasanga method, what it seeks to do. And then second step is to try to understand what that means. And this is what we're going to do with chapter 24 and 13. But the first step is really important, which is using the Madhyamaka reasoning to see how any alternative or binary oppositions lead to implausible consequences. And so that's a Madhyamaka method, and that's important to go through that step again and again, and not to rest on a kind of slogan like everything is empty, things like that, but to go through the reasonings again and again so that one really understands that however one conceives of things, that way of this way of conceiving things on the basis of binary opposition needs to necessary contradictions. And that's what the Nagarjunan or Nagarjuna's method is seeking to do. That's why I think using the term of deconstruction is appropriate. That's a very fashionable term, obviously. Every student on the college campus uses it, but very often it's used very inappropriately. But here it's quite appropriate. It is the kind of deconstructive method in which each alternative is shown to lead to unwanted, unacceptable consequence. And so we have done this with the first chapter about causality. We didn't have time to do the second chapter. I invite you to look at it, which is the chapter on going. And there again, Nagarjuna applies the same method by looking at whether the going is happening on the not yet gone, or the gone over, or whether there is a third alternative between the place on which one has not gone and the place on which one is gone. And so that's a similar kind of approach, which leads to the same kind of undoing of any alternative or binary opposition. So the question is, what does that mean? And that's what we're looking at today and next time. So today is chapter 24, right? There is no question? Everybody understands where we are? Okay. Sorry, so I need to find. Yeah. So, chapter 24 is going to deal with the objections of Buddhist who is followers of what I call basic Buddhism, what Tibetan would call Hinayana Buddhism, or what could be called also a follower of the Abhidharma, right? Everybody is familiar with all these terms, right? So the objection is coming from the Buddhist side. The Mūlamadhyamakakārikā address itself to different schools. Its main what you say, Purvapaksha, its main target is Abhidharma, what we could call Abhidharma Buddhism, right? And Abhidharma Buddhism is based on the idea of analyzing things into dharmas, right? And that's the basis of the Abhidharma view, right? The classical reference for this approach is in the book called the Milinda Panya, which is Questions of King Milinda, in which Milinda, who is a Greek king from Bactria, king called Menander, asked questions to a Buddhist monk called Nagarjuna, right? And so the question is about the chariot and what is a chariot? And Nagarjuna answers that the chariot does not really exist. It's a simple name given to a bunch of parts, right? Everybody is familiar with that? And so in the Abhidharma, we have the two truths, two levels of reality, the conventional level, which is object, large scale object, and then the ultimate level, the ultimate truth, which is made of absolute simples, right? Either partless moments of consciousness or partless material particles. And those are called dharmas. And it's the advancement, the combinations of dharma, which produced our everyday life reality, which is made of large objects, extended objects, which the Abhidharma call only conventionally real, right? Everybody, I assume, is familiar with that. That's the basic of Buddhist philosophy, right? That's how Buddhist philosophy developed through the idea of the two truths, right? And the idea is found among followers of the Abhidharma who think about reality as made of these ultimate simples, material particle or partless moments of awareness, which combine in tremendously complex ways through dependent origination, dependent arising, and produce our world of our everyday life reality, right? And that's a basic Buddhist philosophy that is developed on the basis of the Abhidharma, right? And its classical expression is found in the Milinda Panha, which is the kind of classical reference for that kind of view. What is real are the dharmas. The chariot is just a kind of conventional designation given to a bunch of dharmas because it would be tremendously cumbersome, or not just cumbersome, impossible to deal with reality on the basis of dharmas, because there are zillions of dharmas, right? In any object, there are many, many millions of dharma, millions of partless particle interacting in a material object, right? And so it's obviously completely impossible to deal with that complex reality. What we need to do is to, well, what we do is kind of deal with this object at a much higher level, at the macro level. And this is what the Abhidharma calls conventional reality, right? Whereas the dharmas, the partless particles or the partless moments of awareness, are ultimately true, real. That's how the idea of the two truths, the doctrine of the two truths, is first developed, right? It has very little basis in the early teachings of the Buddha, but it's developed gradually by the Abhidharma tradition, which then lists all the dharmas and establish this list that people have to memorize of all the dharmas. And that's a way to understand the Buddhist view. And that view obviously gets its main application to the doctrine of no self, because the chariot stands for the self, right, or the person. And the idea is that the person is simply a convenient name given to a complex of material and mental phenomena in very complex interaction through the dependent arising. And so there is no self, the person is conventional, the aggregates are real, right? Any question? Everybody is familiar with these ideas, right? I mean, this is basic Buddhism. If you haven't read it, you should absolutely read the Questions of King Milinda. This is a very interesting text. It's one, sorry, of the earliest text, Buddhist text that we have. Okay, so notice that what is important in this doctrine is the idea of a two-tier ontology, right? That is, reality has kind of two levels. There is two levels of being. There is a level of like the ultimate level, which means what is real, what is really real. And then there is what is only conventionally real, right? Sounds familiar to everybody? Okay, so in the Abhidharma or in the Milinda Panha, let's say, because the main method is to look for the relation between whole and parts, right? And so the chariot has parts like the wheel and, well, I don't even know all the names in English, but it has a bunch of parts, right? And so the main way to proceed here is to analyze the whole, meaning the chariot, in relation to its part. And when one do that, one realizes that there is no, that the chariot does not really exist, right? It's just a conventional reality. It's a convenient way to talk about a bunch of parts. And so if we continue this search, we get to the ultimate level, which is this partless particle and these partless moments of awareness, right? And it's a combination of these dharmas, these ultimate simples, that creates the person and that creates the reality, the conventional reality in which persons live, right? Everybody is on board? So this is where the idea of the two truths comes from, right? This two level of being, of reality, one ultimate reality and one conventional reality. The word truth is kind of a bit of an annoyance, because in Western philosophy, truth is predicated of statement or of cognitions, but not of pots, pans, and partless particles, right? So to call pots and pans ultimate truth is kind of conventional truth, sorry, it's kind of strange things to do. It's kind of Buddhist jargon. So what that means here is simply that what is conventionally real, right? So it's real. It's true from the point of view of our conventions, from the point of view of what there really is. What is true are the dharmas, right? This is the ultimate reality. So in that way of proceeding, there is a level of reality which is not fully real. And then that level of reality, which is a conventional level, is supported by a deeper level of reality, which is what is really there, right? This is why I talk about the two-tier ontology, right? And so in the chapter 24, Nagarjuna is going to use this doctrine of the two truths in his own way. That is, it's going to transform the basic Buddhist idea of the two truths as found, for example, in the Milinda Panya and many early texts, and is going to turn this into a Madhyamaka doctrine, right? And that's what we have to talk about today. So the chapter, starts with, from stanza 1 to stanza 6, by an objection from the proponent of the Abhidharma, who says, comprehension, abandonment, practice, and personal realization, none of this is possible due to the non-existence of the Four Noble Truths. If you, Nagarjuna, say that the middle way is neither is nor is not, it means that there is no Four Noble Truth. And due to the non-existence of the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Fruits off-stream winner, once-reader, never-returner, and arhat do not exist. If the fruit are non-existent, then they are neither the striver for nor the attainer of those fruit. The Sangha does not exist if the 8 kinds of person do not exist. And because of the non-existence of the Noble Truth, the true Dharma does not exist either. Dharma and Sangha being non-existent, how will the Buddha come to be? In this way, you deny all 3 jewels when you proclaim emptiness. You deny the real existence of karmic fruit, both good and bad action, and all worldly modes of conduct. So that's the objection of the Abhidharmika, right? Of the basic Buddhist, who says it's okay to take apart, to deconstruct the objects of daily life, the self, and so on. But in order for that to work, there need to be something that is real, right? And this is, and the something that is real, what I have called the dharmas, which are these ultimate simples, which cannot be further deconstructed, taken apart, because they have no parts, right? And so the objection is that without that level, that kind of deeper level of reality, what you're going to end up is just denying the existence of anything, because you don't have anything real to point to back up the existence of this object. So if you were to say, well, does the Buddha exist? Well, the Buddha is, for the Abhidharmika, is a bunch of atoms and a bunch of partless moments of wisdom put together. And this bunch of dharmas, we give the name Buddha, right? Now, if there are nothing real, no real ultimate simples, then how can you say that the Buddha, how can we talk about the Buddha, right? That's the qualm of Nagarjuna's adversary, or the objection, right? Everybody understands this objection, where this objection is coming from, right? Okay, stanza 7. Here we say that you do not understand the point of teaching emptiness, emptiness in self and the meaning of emptiness. In this way, you are thus frustrated. The Dharma teaching of the Buddha rests on 2 truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. Who do not know the distinction between the 2 truths, they do not understand reality according with the profound teaching of the Buddha. The ultimate truth is not taught independently of customary ways of talking and thinking, nor having acquired the ultimate truth, nirvana is not attained. Emptiness is misunderstood, destroyed, or slow-witted, like a serpent wrongly held or a spell wrongly executed. Hence, a sage intention to teach the Dharma was turned back, considering the difficulty for the slow of penetrating this Dharma. Moreover, the objection that you make concerning emptiness cannot be a faulty consequence for us or for emptiness. All is possible when emptiness is possible. Nothing is possible where emptiness is impossible. You throwing your own fault on us are like the person mounted on a horse who forgets the horse. Okay. So we have to understand what Nagarjuna is saying, because this is where it gets trickier. Okay, so what Nagarjuna is saying is what? What does Nagarjuna understand? How does Nagarjuna understand the two truths? And is this an answer to the objection that he outlines?
Phenomena is possible because it is empty.
Okay, so the objection is that the Buddha cannot be because there is nothing that is ultimately real, right?
Yeah, that's the objection.
That's the objection, right? We all agree on that, right? Okay, so what is Nagarjuna's answer?
I think the answer is in 10 that the ultimate truth is not taught independently of customary ways of talking and thinking. And I think that, yeah, I think that what's meant here is that the opponent is confused as to what's exactly meant by emptiness, because there's no other way to teach it to the opponent except through conventional customary language.
Through language, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the confusion of the opponent? Is the opponent really confused? Or has the opponent?
No, I don't know. The opponent is. I think the opponent isn't confused. Is the opponent's mistaken? I should clarify.
Okay. Do you want to explain why?
I think. I mean, but Sneh, you had something to say. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
You're on the hot seat.
So I forgot that train of thought, but I think the reason why Abhidharma schools have a hard time relying on these partless particles and partless moments is when you start looking for them, they're incoherent.
Okay.
So and I think, sorry.
Yeah, go, keep going.
And so I thought what Nagarjuna, and separately, I think what Nagarjuna is also trying to say is that, you know, you are wedded to this idea that existence must be predicated on something real that you can touch and you can talk about, but it's also possible to talk about existence in the way I'm suggesting, where nothing is sort of like concrete that you need to touch, but you can still say there is a flower. You know, you can still talk about things. And in my mind, I think about it like the gold standard, like money being backed by gold and money being just paper and ink. And we say it has value because we all agree it has value.
Okay. So what is real here?
For Nagarjuna?
Yes.
I think Nagarjuna wouldn't say it like that. Like, because for him, if you start talking about real things, then it gets very confusing.
Okay, what do you mean?
I think, because I think
talks all the time about real things.
Yes, but I think for us, when I think about real things, I'm like Abhidharma. I think
this is what
really
he's talking
things.
all the time about real things, right? I mean, to negate them, right?
So the real thing here is that things exist on its own from their own side, according to the Abhidharma?
According to the Abhidharma, yes, exactly. Things existing on the own side, meaning things that are findable when we do the kind of analysis that Nakasena does with King Milinda, right? Looking for the chariot, looking at its parts, and what is the chariot, the wheel, the chariot, and so on. And so the Abhidharma view of the two truths is that the objects which are findable under such analysis are what is real, right? Because when we look for them, this is what we find ultimately.
Well, following their own logic, there is an inconsistency in how there's an inconsistency. Now, if the
In
chariot,
whom?
Abhidharma.
Okay,
So if-
what's the inconsistency?
So if the simple Dharma, the simple ultimates are real,
Yes,
then their aggregation have to be real
why?
because it is made up of what made up of them is real.
Okay,
So-
so you think that wholes are real?
No, I mean, according to Abhidharma,
No, I mean according to Abhidharma.
no, I'm not talking about Nagarjuna. I'm talking about
No, I'm not talking to about Nagarjuna either.
I'm talking about inconsistency within their own Abhidharma view.
So I'm asking, this is a book, it's made of parts, right?
Mhm.
Now, what does it mean to be real for you? For the Abhidharma, now you could give me two answers. For the Abhidharma, what is real, it means it is what is findable when I look for it among its parts, right?
My own conceptual understanding, I have no real realization. I can't say at this point that there's anything that's real.
I'm talking about the Abhidharma. Let's not, let's keep.
Yeah,
Since-
I'm not understanding your question. So according to the Abhidharma, what is real is what
This is a cup, right? It's made of parts, right?
yeah,
So when I look for the cup, what do I find? I find the parts, right?
yes.
So the cup is not real. What is real are the parts, right?
And I'm saying that that is an inconsistent view.
Why is it inconsistent?
If the parts are real, the whole has to be real.
Why not? Why?
Because
Think
what
about-
made up of the whole is
think
real.
about what is real for Abhidharma is what's causally effective, right? What is doing the causal work? Is it the cup itself, or is it all the atoms which make up the cups?
I don't know how they see that.
Right? So
It
for
is
the
not. It
for
is
the
not logical.
For the
I'm so sorry.
Abhidharma, like if you are a scientist and says, what is this cup? He will say it's a bunch of atoms, right? Made of particles. And that's what's really real. The cup is just a convenient way for us to talk about all this bunch of particles put together, right? But what is really functioning here is the particles, right? The reason my tea is not going through is because the particles are repelling the particles of tea, right?
It may be so, but the particles are arranged in the form of a cup, and they are arranged in the form of a chair, and they
Yes.
are arranged in a different form of things. So because the constituent parts are real, if they assert that the constituent parts are real, then the whole that make up of those parts has to be real. That's
So
And-
the
yeah.
whole is what?
The whole is, and then the fact that we give names to this whole, we can say that the names are just a name, but they cannot say that the whole itself is not
But
real
if
because
we take
they are
the
asserting that
parts,
the parts are real.
if we take the parts, the thing apart, you know, you have a sweater, you take the one after the other out, there is nothing left, right?
Well, according to them, you take the thing apart, what is left are those simple dharmas.
Exactly, thank you.
So the fact that you take them apart and only simple dharma left, it does not mean when you put those simple dharmas together that them being together is not real.
So what is the cup? All
It's
the
a
parts
configuration
together?
of the Dharma in the form of a cup.
Okay. And
Uh-huh.
all the parts put together?
Yeah, for the cup. Yeah, all the parts put together in a
Okay.
certain arrangement. Uh-huh.
So the chariot is all the parts put together, right?
Yeah, the parts of the chariot put together.
All the parts, right?
All the parts. There's a trick here. Yeah.
Yes, there is a trick here, right? All the parts or some of the parts.
Yeah. So whether it is some of the part or all
No,
of
no,
the part,
answer my questions. You're trying to evade my question. So, you know, you want to play that? Let's play that game.
okay, okay.
All the parts or some of the parts?
When they use the word chariot, they meant the whole chariot.
So all the parts, right?
Yeah. And
You
somebody
sure?
somebody come along and decided to call a chariot without a wheel also a chariot. So that is a chariot.
So all the parts, right?
Okay, all the parts.
So have you seen a chariot?
Have I seen a chariot?
Have you ever seen a car? Because
Yeah,
a
I've seen
car
a
is
car.
the sum of all its parts, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Have you seen the sum of all its parts? I
Have I
really
seen a
doubt
car?
it.
I've been driving a car, so yeah, I've seen a car.
You seen, but you have not seen the sum of all its parts, right?
I don't understand. What do you mean by the sum of all its parts?
You said that car is the sum of all its parts, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So I'm asking you whether you've seen the car, and you answer yes. So the car is the sum of all its parts. So if you see the car, you see the sum of all its parts, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So you've seen all the parts.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Really?
Well, I haven't opened the hood. Do you mean for me to open the hood? And all of
Well,
that?
to open the hood, to take apart all the...
Oh, have I seen all the simple dharmas that make up the car?
Well, you can even see all the mechanical part. I would be happy with that because I doubt that
No,
unless you...
if that is what you mean by seen all the parts, no, I have not seen all the parts.
Okay, so
I'm
you
just
have not
assuming
seen
that
the
they are
car,
there.
right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
So you have not seen the car, right?
Okay, I have not seen the car.
Okay. You have not seen the car, right? You sure?
Well, if that is your
No,
definition
answer my
of seeing,
question.
well, I have to know what you're asking. So if you
Whether
mean by
you've seen
seeing
a
the
car
car,
on, whether you've seen
every
the
little
car or
tiny
not.
part, every screws,
No,
then if that is what you meant by seeing, I have not
Have you
seen
seen
the car.
the car or not?
I cannot answer your questions if I do
You
not
see
know
the
what you're
fact,
asking.
the fact that for the Abhidharma, and this is the same for Madhyamaka, the
Uh-huh.
fact that the car that we see has no real criteria of identification is a sign that it is conventional truth. Meaning when we see the car, this is just a convenient way to talk about what we see. What we really see is a bunch of parts. Do we see all the parts? No, we don't see all the parts. We never see all the parts, right? And so the car is just a convenient way that we talk about this tremendously complex arrangement of stuff that makes up the car, right? And so that's why the Abhidharma called this conventionally real, right? Because it has no real criteria of existence in the sense, when I see a part of the car, I see the car, yes, but if some circumstance I see the car, some circumstance I might not see the part, I might not see the car, I might just see the part. You know, same with human bodies, right? When I see another person, I see, what do I see? Well, sometimes very little, right? Especially nowadays where everybody wearing masks and so on. And so the car, the person, and so on for the Abhidharma is just conventionally real, because it has no strict criteria of existence.
Okay, for the Abhidharma, would the wheel of the car be ultimate truth or conventional truth?
Conventional truth. Because I can play the same trick. You don't see all the parts, blah, blah, blah. It's all reducible to this partless. Ultimately, what we're going to get is this partless particles, right? So, question is, what does Nagarjuna do with the two truths? Nagarjuna's answer is going to be, no, you're mistaken. The Buddha, the Dharma, Sangha, the Four Noble Truths do exist conventionally, right? That's the answer, right? Right? Okay. So if they exist conventionally, what is real for Nagarjuna?
Nothing is real.
Emptiness is real for Nagarjuna.
That would be, in a
Emptiness is
way,
not real.
what Nagarjuna is talking on stanza 11. Emptiness misunderstood, destroyed, the slow-witted, like a serpent wrongly had, or a spell wrongly executed. For Nagarjuna, emptiness is not real. Emptiness is no more real than anything else, right? Emptiness is simply the absence of finding things when we analyze them. And so that is emptiness, and it's no more real than anything else. In a way, it's less real than anything else. It's like if you go to a bakery and you ask for croissant, and the baker answers, I don't have any croissant anymore. And you ask, and you say to the baker, well, give me an absence of croissant. The baker wouldn't know what to do, right? Because an absence of croissant is just a way to conceptualize the situation. There is nothing to sell, right? So Nagarjuna used the two truths in this very, very peculiar way, because the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, everything is conventionally true, conventionally real. What is ultimately real? No thing are ultimately real, right? All dharmas are empty. Okay? Does that make sense? And so for Nagarjuna, he uses the two truths in a really different way than the Abhidharma, because the Abhidharma has this two-tier way of thinking about reality, two-tier ontology. And here Nagarjuna use a kind of trick, because in Madhyamaka, there is only one tier ontology, right? There are only things that exist conventionally. There are no ultimately real things. And to answer your qualm, emptiness is said to be ultimate truth, but if we were to look for emptiness, we would find the emptiness of emptiness, right? And so emptiness is not real. And so it's even in a way less real, if we were to say, but certainly not more real than pots, pans, and persons, right? Which are all conventionally real. Make sense? That's the Nagarjuna's idea of emptiness, right? Which is captured by the Prajnaparamita slogan that everything is, all dharmas are empty, right? All dharmas are empty, meaning dharmas are conventionally real, and the lack of reality is the emptiness, right? And that's the idea of the two truths.
When Nagarjuna say all dharmas are empty, the dharma here, is that the same dharma as Abhidharma referring
Yes,
to?
yes,
Okay.
that's what it's thinking about, right? Now, the dharmas, the Abhidharma have very complex list of dharmas. So they're material dharmas, which are made of earth, water, fire, air, and sometimes space. And then there are the mental dharmas, which are all the mental factors, right? Consciousness and all the mental factors. So the Abhidharma is listing a bunch of dharmas, right? And what the Prajnaparamita Sutra is saying, that there is no dharma are real, they're empty, right? And the fact of they being not findable under analysis is the lack of reality. It is the emptiness, right? And so emptiness is ultimate truth, but it's not ultimately real, right? Because no things are ultimately real. That's Nagarjuna's idea of the two truths, right? That's a way to answer the Abhidharmika objection, but if things are empty, we don't have the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. The answer is Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are conventional, and the fact that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are not real is the emptiness, and you have not understood the two truths properly, right? Why is emptiness called ultimate truth?
I have a question.
Yes,
if I
please.
may. So I think I followed you up until this point concerning the fact that the Madhyamaka rejects sort of a two-tiered ontology.
Yes.
Is there any way that we can see it, however, as a kind of like two-tiered epistemology where like the conventional truth is like a misrecognition?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
That's in fact how Chandrakirti does it, right?
Okay.
But it's complicated because I was going to skip that, but the word conventional in Sanskrit is samvriti, which means both deceitful as well as dependent, as well as conventional. So the word samvriti has three meanings, and as you can probably see, there is a kind of tension between meaning one and meaning two, in the sense that if we say that the pot is deceitful, we might be quickly tempted to say the pot is non-existent, right? Is a kind of complete illusion, right? Which would be contradicting the second meaning of conventional, which is interdependent, right? That's Chandrakirti, who established these three meanings of conventional, of the word samvriti. One is deceitful, deceptive maybe. Second is dependent. Third one is conventional, meaning the object of the linguistic designation. Oh, I see a hand.
Hi, Professor Dreyfus. Yeah.
I don't see you, so it's a little bit worrisome, but I assume you're a real person. So
Yes, I am.
as
I'm
much
sorry.
as anything can be real in Madhyamaka. So go ahead.
I'm a bit confused with the terms that you just said. Emptiness is ultimate true, but not
Yes.
ultimate real.
That's
So
right.
in my understanding, truth and reality is pretty much the same. Like when we say, if
Yeah, that's why
like
you
when we
are
say,
absolutely right. That's why Nagarjuna is using the Abhidharma scheme in a really tricky way, because in a sense, it's contradictory to talk about ultimate reality, right? Because nothing exists ultimately.
yes, and even emptiness.
Exactly.
Yes. And
So my question was, why does he call it ultimate truth or ultimate reality? I agree that in Madhyamaka, we should keep maybe the term ultimate truth. It works in a way better, though it's weird to use truth for something like emptiness, right? So the reason emptiness is ultimately true is that it's, in a way, ultimately valuable. Because when we understand emptiness, we are led towards liberation. So it's ultimately valuable. Also, it is the only, I find it difficult to use, I will use the word thing, but it's not a thing, right? It's the only X, let me use this term, it's the only X that is not deceitful. Meaning emptiness does not deceive, because emptiness is not real. And if you understand emptiness, you understand the emptiness of emptiness as well. And therefore, emptiness is the only X which is not deceitful. Everything else is deceitful because everything else presents itself as real, whereas it's not. It doesn't mean it's unreal, but it means it's neither real nor unreal. It's empty, right? Emptiness is empty too, but you know it by looking at its sleeves. In its sleeve, it says, I am empty. It doesn't say, I am real. Whereas a pot says on its sleeve or on its forehead, maybe better. The pot on its forehead tells you, I am real. Emptiness on its forehead tells you, I'm not real. I am empty. That's why emptiness is ultimate truth, though it's not ultimately real. More questions? Yes, please. Jackie, you
I don't
still
know.
have your hand up, so you need to take it down, unless you have another question. Yes, please, go ahead.
In your just the words you gave for conventional existence, deceptive,
Yes.
dependent, and conventional,
Yes.
almost are the definition of conventional,
This is
rather than just just synonyms. Would you say
not-
that's true or not? That's a question.
No, it's not the definition. It's a gloss that Chandrakirti gives, right? And it proceeds like many of these Indian thinkers. He proceeds linguistically and look at the word samvriti, and he teases out three meanings, right? Deceptive, dependent, and conventional in the sense of being an object of designation, right? Now you could say, yeah, conventional truth is all these three things, right? Yes.
That's what I was, it just
You're
seemed
right.
like there was a linkage in meaning in that,
Yes,
that is unusual instead of just being synonymous.
well, it's unusual, but it's at the heart of this idea of the two truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're right. Of the two truth has, conventional truth is both deceptive, dependent, and object of designation, hence conventional, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes. Now, whether this is a definition or not is going to depend on how we understand verse 18 or stanza 18, which says, dependent origination we declare to be emptiness. Emptiness is a dependent concept, just that is the middle way. This is the heart of the matter.
In-
How do we understand this stanza? Now, there are two interpretations of this stanza. And they're kind of slightly different. And we'll keep seeing that difference in chapter 13. So dependent origination we declare to be emptiness. Emptiness is a dependent concept. Just that is the middle way. So what Nagarjuna is saying is that whatever is dependent origination is empty, right?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it does. Okay. Now, is he saying that whatever is empty is dependent origination? Well, that depends. That's a difficult question.
In a way, first I was thinking no, but now I'm thinking yes, because whenever we think of emptiness, it's always emptiness of something, and that something
Yes.
is always dependently originated.
Yes,
So
but
emptiness,
is emptiness dependent origination?
and that's why I'm having trouble, like which way
Yes.
I would I would argue
That's a
that because,
difficult question.
because it will arise only when something that is dependently originated arises. So then I would say yes, it is dependently originated.
Okay. Notice that what is Nagarjuna is saying is dependent origination is emptiness, right? He doesn't say emptiness is dependent origination, right? Right?
I think I'm superimposing form as emptiness, emptiness as form on this.
Okay, you can do that. I'm not sure whether it applies here, but that's indeed a point on which we can think more deeply about. For example, oh, sorry, you have a hand. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that that emptiness as a non-affirming negation is not dependent origination.
Okay. Now, whether
Would that be
emptiness is-
correct? I don't know. That's just what I'm
Okay.
thinking.
That's okay. I'm going to correct you, but I see what you want to say, because you're mixing what Tsongkhapa is saying with what other people are saying, because there are here two interpretations, right? Tsongkhapa is saying whatever is empty, whatever is dependent origination is empty, whatever is empty is dependent origination. They are what you say in Tibetan Tönchik, which means mutually implicative. And so if you want to say, to use the language non-affirming negation, which is a way a Geluk scholar talks about emptiness, then you would have to go towards Tsongkhapa and say, no, emptiness is dependent origination, because the two are kind of mutually implicative. They're the same. They're the two faces of the same coin. That's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is, this is such an interesting stanza, is to say, no, this is not what this is saying, because emptiness is not a Dharma. What is dependent origination are Dharmas. Emptiness is not a Dharma. Emptiness is simply the absence of svabhava or bhava, svabhava of intrinsic nature of all the Dharmas, right? And that's not the Dharma. It's not like you count the Dharma and then you have one more to add, which is emptiness. Emptiness is not a Dharma. It's not a something. It's not a nothing either. It is the middle way, right? So these are the two ways to think about this extremely interesting verse. One is to say emptiness as dependent origination are mutually implicative. I don't use the word synonymous, because synonymous means that they would be, that one you understand the other, right? So synonymous is not quite the right word. Mutually implicative, everybody understands the word, meaning if one is one, necessarily the other is two, right?
Yeah.
The second way of thinking is to say, no, I would not use the word non-affirming negation, because that's Gelugpa way of thinking about emptiness. I would use the word mere absence, right? And the second way is saying, no, emptiness is just the mere absence of svabhava of all the dharmas. And that's not dependent origination, because it's not the Dharma. Which doesn't mean it's real. It's empty as well, right? Because emptiness is empty as well. Two ways to think about one of the central verse in the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, right? One is to think emptiness and dependent origination, dependent arising, the same. They're mutually implicative. The other is to think, no, emptiness is not a Dharma, therefore it's not dependent origination, which does not mean that it's real, because it's also empty. Yes.
I feel like I'm getting caught up in language here.
Well, we have to use language
Yeah.
by definition.
I would not say that emptiness is dependent arising and dependent arising is emptiness.
Okay.
But I would say that
That's what
that's what-
Tsongkhapa is saying, by the way.
I'm not sure. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Just
But
to
what-
locate who is saying what. So what I meant to say is that this is not just a kind of dumb mistake. This is one way to think about this text. There is another way to think about this text, because this text is a very rich text which has multiple ways of being understood. Some of the ways of being understood is really dumb, but that's not one of them, right?
Okay.
This is a very rich text, and it's very useful to kind of entertain alternative interpretations, so as to kind of open the text to various possibilities. And this is one of these texts that really
Okay, I don't do a
works
lot
like
of
that.
reading, so I do not know who say what. But from what I understood from the teaching that I've heard, what I would say is that, and I could be mistaken, what I would say is that whatever is dependent arising is empty,
Yes.
and whatever is empty dependently arise.
So you just contradicted yourself. Because before that you said whatever is dependently arising is empty. Nobody disagrees. Question is whatever is empty is dependently arising. That's where there are two
Whatever
ways.
is empty, no, what I'm not saying that whatever is empty dependently arise.
So it's dependent arising, right? That's what,
No, I'm not saying
no,
that.
there
I'm
you're
not saying
making.
that emptiness is dependent arising. Those are two different sentences. So
So
whatever
no,
object
sorry,
that I
let
say
me ask you,
empty,
is emptiness dependent arising?
no,
No. So emptiness is not dependent arising, right?
no.
Okay. So stick to that, because this is what you're saying. So emptiness
No,
is
that's
not,
not what I was saying.
yes.
You were putting
Emptiness,
words in my mouth.
emptiness is not dependently arising, right? Because dependent arising and dependently arising in Tibetan and Sanskrit is the same term.
I'm speaking English. I don't speak
Yes.
Tibetan and I don't speak Sanskrit.
We're looking at the Sanskrit text, right?
Yeah,
Some-
but
it just-
I can understand things in English because I
Yes.
speak only English. So
pratitya samutpada. That means
you
arising.
would like
in-
me to say that emptiness
Sorry, can
is
you listen
dependent
to me?
arising.
I think I am, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
It
sorry.
means to arise dependently, okay?
Mhm.
Now, in English, we say dependent arising, but the Sanskrit term means to arise dependently. And the text is saying whatever arises dependently is empty.
Is empty.
Question, whatever is empty, dependently arising or not? That's, okay, that's the question here. Everybody understands the two ways to interpret this text, right?
Because
Yes.
if the second,
Other people, please.
okay, all right.
Yeah, I just had a question, Professor. Is the second way what you're saying chapter 13 is about, or in
Yes.
chapter 13 does he talk about both interpretations?
No, it's the second way.
Because that's very interesting.
So
that seems to
that's
me
the
more
second
subtle.
way to understand. The first way to understand is to think that arising dependently, to use the word so that there is no mistake, arising dependently and being empty are one and the same.
Right.
That's the first way to think about this stanza. Second way to think about this stanza is they are not the same. Simply whatever arises dependently is empty. This doesn't mean that what is empty necessarily arise dependently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep, I do. I understand it.
That's a distinction that is important to keep in mind when we think about this verse, right? Sorry, you were saying?
I lost it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I forgot.
That's okay.
Yes.
Catherine, do you have a question?
Sorry. Yeah. Would you have an example of that second version that
Emptiness is not dependent arising.
so okay, so that would be just the fact there's no example to sort of
No,
illustrate.
emptiness is not dependent arising.
End of the
Meaning
story.
it's not arising dependently.
Right. Okay. Thank
Now,
you.
that would be interpretation number 2, right?
Right.
Interpretation number 1 would say, no. Emptiness is arising dependently because it's not real. It's not ultimately real, right? That's
Right.
interpretation number 1.
Right.
Of
But
this-
interpretation number 2 is just a sentence, no further.
Yeah, interpretation 2 is say whatever is arising dependently is empty. What about emptiness? Well, it's just a mere designation.
Okay, so that was the explanation in some way.
Yes, it's a mere designation, and this is what is the middle way. It's not a Dharma, because it's a mere absence, right?
Yes.
It's not a thing.
Thank you.
Yes, you remember now, Amy.
I did, yeah. So,
Good.
so with one way, emptiness is a mere absence be ultimate truth, and emptiness is dependent origination be conventional truth. I mean, could one say that? Would
What?
that be the difference?
But yes, but ultimate, that dependent origination, meaning arising dependently, is conventional truth, right? Yes.
And the other is ultimate truth. The
Yes.
mere absence is ultimate truth.
Yes,
Oops.
which doesn't mean that emptiness is real. It means it's not a Dharma, right? It's like, it's a mere absence, right? If you think
Yeah.
to my example, if you go to the bakery and ask for a croissant, right? Which is what I do when I go to the bakery. If the baker answers you, there is no croissant, it's a category mistake to say, well, so give me an absence of croissant, right? Croissant and absence of croissant are not the same kind of thing, right? Absence of croissant is not a thing, right? It's merely a conceptualization of the situation, right? Emptiness is not a thing, but a part or a person is a thing, at least conventionally, right? So emptiness is not conventionally real, it's just ultimate truth. Because it's a different kind of existence, right? It's a different kind of X, not existent, because it neither exists nor not exists, right? So this is why it's convenient to use algebraic notation, X, right? X and emptiness and persons are X's, but not the same kind of X's, right? The pot is a thing conventionally, it exists conventionally. Emptiness is not a thing. It does not exist conventionally. It doesn't exist ultimately. It's a mere absence of intrinsic nature of the pot, right? That's the emptiness of the pot.
And doesn't that, and the fact that it's a different kind of an X, doesn't that relate to verse 10, that it's not taught independently of customary ways of talking and thinking?
Yes, exactly, because
Yeah.
though it is not a different, though it is a different kind of X, we still need to talk about it, right?
Right. Right.
Yes. And what is absolutely the most important is that you understand that the reason that emptiness is not conventionally real is not because emptiness is ultimately real. It's because in a way it's less real than conventional truth, right? It's just this mere absence which kind of deconstructs itself, because when you look for the mere absence, you find the absence of the absence. And when you look for the absence of the absence, you find the absence of the absence of the absence, and so on ad infinitum, right?
Right.
And so emptiness is not conventionally real, but it's not ultimately real. It's neither ultimately real, right? Because no X are ultimately real. Because as soon as I start to talk of thing, then we're talking about dharmas, right? That's that's interpretation 2, right? Interpretation 1 is emptiness and dependent arising are co-implicative. They are the same thing. Which is why you were talking the first class about relational being, right? And that's a different way to interpret this stanza.
Sorry, just to put a name to it. So interpretation 1 is Tsongkhapa, probably.
Yes.
Interpretation 2 is like.
Do you speak Tibetan?
No, I don't.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Just asking, because in Tibetan it's very clear. They have the same meaning, right?
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I guess my question was, who is arguing for interpretation 2, like in the commentaries?
Other thinkers. Probably Chandrakirti is thinking in those terms. And I would think, though I haven't looked at non-Geluk commentaries, they would think the same thing as well. But I haven't looked at how they interpret this particular verse. If you look at your reading at the book of Sidritz and Katsura, okay. Oh, sorry. On page 277, in the commentary of stanza 18, they quote Chandrakirti, right? And their commentary is based on this understanding of 18ab. Emptiness is not the same thing as dependent origination. It is rather something that follows from dependent origination. Anything that is dependently originated must be empty, but this leaves it open whether there are empty things that are not dependently originated, namely emptiness, right? And that's a commentary of Chandrakirti.
To have the same meaning, tunchik, does not mean they are the same.
Well, doesn't mean what, I don't know what you mean the same, but tunchik means mutually implicative.
Yeah, so it does not
Yes.
mean that they are the same.
Well,
in fact, that because they are tunchik, they are necessarily different.
Yeah, they're conceptually distinct. Yes, that's
like impermanent and functioning thing are tunchik.
yes, exactly. So it means they are
impermanent. It's not functioning thing.
Well, it's the same thing, but it's conceptually different.
But if we use if we think of is like an equal sign, impermanent is not functioning thing.
Depends
But they are
whether you
mutual-
talk
But whatever
extensively.
is impermanent is functioning thing.
Depends whether you're talking about in extensively or intensively. So that's depends. But anyway, what Tunchik means is whatever is one must be the other and vice versa. That's a definition of Tunchik. So this is why I use the word mutually
Okay.
implicative.
In what, is there a situation where something is empty, but it is not dependently arising?
Not for Tsongkhapa, no. Not
For other
interpretation.
people who disagree with that.
Yes,
What situation in which something is empty,
emptiness.
but it is not dependently arising?
Yes, emptiness.
Well, emptiness is also dependently arising.
No, not for
It is
this.
dependent on being designated. It's
That's
dependent on the
Tsongkhapa's,
base.
that's Tsongkhapa's understanding. Yes, it is.
So how is emptiness not dependently arising?
Because it's not arising. It's a mere absence.
So it's a mere absence that cannot exist by itself. It depends. It is always an emptiness of something.
Yes, yes. But it
Yeah. So
doesn't
because
mean,
because it's an emptiness of something, when that something is gone, the emptiness of that something is also
yes,
gone.
it is dependent.
So
but
in that
it's not-
sense,
it's
it is
not
dependent-
dependent
it is
arising
dependent.
because it's not a something.
well, the dependent arising there has three ways of depending. You know, so
That's again Tsongkhapa's way of understanding. Yes, that's why I give you two interpretations, right? This is a rich text.
the
So
two understanding are not contradictory.
no, they are
It's
kind
just
of,
explaining the different aspects of it.
that's right, that's right. They're not, I mean, they're different, but it's not like one is right and one is wrong. Cristobal, did you have a, was that an answer or no?
Yeah, I guess
Question?
I sort of have a comment. I guess the point for the second interpretation is that if we see emptiness as, what was the term used?
Mere absence.
Mutually implicative, dependent
No,
arising.
mere absent.
Yeah, so I'm arguing if in terms of the second interpretation,
Yes,
against the first, if we see them as mutually implicative, then emptiness is sort of conditioned and it would sort of be the same as any conventionally real object. Is that kind of the point?
the point I think is that emptiness is a different kind of vex than pots and persons. And so if we were to say that they're mutually implicative, we might be in danger of thinking that emptiness is just one dharma like all the other dharmas, right? But for the second way to interpret this term, this stanza, emptiness is not like the Abhidharma, like the other dharma, right? And that's, I think, what they want to emphasize, right? If you look at page, the following stanza 19, there being no dharma whatsoever that is not dependently originated, it follows that there is also no dharma whatsoever that is non-empty, right? And so the idea here in the second interpretation is that emptiness is not a dharma, which doesn't mean it's not empty because it's empty, right? But the emptiness of emptiness is different in that it wears on its forehead the fact of being empty, whereas pots and persons wears on their foreheads that they are real. And that's why they're deceptive, whereas emptiness is not deceptive, right?
May I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Very quickly. When you read the text of the Heart Sutra, the way it's usually recited, which version of those two does it kind of connect the most, would you say?
They're both good interpretations.
So in the recitation, you can read it both ways.
Yes. They're very good interpretation, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
And not
Oh, may I ask a question?
who is speaking. Oh, sorry.
No. So if I heard you correctly, Professor Dreyfus, you said the second interpretation was put forward by Chandrakirti.
That's what I think is the case, but I haven't verified in the text. Yes.
So I was just curious because I've always heard that, you know, Lama Tsongkhapa very closely follows the reading of Chandrakirti, who closely follows Nagarjuna.
Yeah.
So I was surprised.
They all claim to follow closely
Okay.
Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna, so don't
Okay.
worry about that.
So,
right?
so my question.
Yeah.
So my question was more, you know, what is it that Lama Tsongkhapa thought was missing in Chandrakirti's, let's say it's Chandrakirti's interpretation that he had to.
No, it's not that something is missing. I think it's a slightly different way to understand emptiness, to conceptualize the understanding of emptiness. That's the important distinction, because emptiness really in itself cannot be fully conceptualized, right? It's not a something. It's not a nothing either, right? It's in the middle, and yet there is nothing between being and not being. And that's where emptiness is. And so Tsongkhapa and the other scholars conceptualize emptiness differently, because for Tsongkhapa, he thinks emptiness basically is the reverse medal from dependently arising.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part?
That he thinks that emptiness is the reverse of the same medal whose other face is dependently origination, dependently arising.
So do you think it would be correct to say that perhaps Lama Tsongkhapa chose the first interpretation because for us, it's easier to understand the nature of reality if we think of it this way?
No,
the second one,
that's he thought that's the way to understand Madhyamaka. Now, his main worry is that people fall into nihilism. So in a way, you may be right, because it's his constant worry that people fall into nihilism. The second way is like, it's not closer to nihilism, because I think it's equally interesting and valid as far as I'm concerned, but it's like it has less safeguards. Yeah. And it's like emptiness is really dangerous, right? Because you can fall easily into nihilism. And so Tsongkhapa was very worried about that. And so in saying that dependently arising and emptiness are mutually implicative, he implies that they are existing, right? And therefore, he moves you away from negating too much, nihilism, right?
So when we hear like dependent arising is the king of reasoning, is it really coming, it is coming from this first interpretation, feels like?
Yeah, well, it is reasoning, but it is, yes, it's much more. I don't know if there are Indian sources for that expression, the king of reasoning. But it is a reasoning, right? Because Chandrakirti will say the pot is empty because it's dependently arising, right? So it's not like one interpretation rejects the reasoning. It's, for everybody, it's an important reasoning, right? But for Chandrakirti, it looks like dependently arising applies only to conventional things. Yes, please.
Isn't it necessary to have both in meditation? to incorporate both views, both the dependent arising equals emptiness and or is co-implicative, is that the term you used? And
that's Tsongkhapa's
and the
term.
other, and Chandrakirti's definition or Chandrakirti's point that emptiness is a mere absence. That both are necessary in coming in a meditative place.
No, I would not agree in that sense. You remember the first night I introduced my teacher, Genyima, who was a foremost expert on Nagarjuna in the entire Gelug tradition, without even the Dalai Lama acknowledge that he's really the person who understands the best this text in the Gelug tradition. We were talking, and then we were talking about people who are meditating on emptiness. And Genyima said, you know, we are really smart about talking about emptiness. And if one of these meditators came to our discussion, we would confuse him in like 20 seconds. We would just completely defeat him, because emptiness is not something that is understandable in the kind of usual way, like analytically. It's really a different kind of what I called X, right? And therefore, some people might have even kind of strange idea about emptiness and actually meditate quite well on emptiness. And some people might be really smart at talking about emptiness and not getting the point. So I think the two are not the same. Now, does it help to understand emptiness conceptually? Yes, it does. And it does particularly because emptiness being this strange kind of X, it's easy to kind of fall into one extreme or the other. It's easy to either reify emptiness or to think, well, nothing exists, it's all my imagination. It's like a dream, right? Which the Prajnaparamita Sutras says again and again. So this is why the conceptual understanding is important. And if you can marry it with meditative analysis, then it's extremely useful and deep in a different way than what we understand depth to be.
Thank you.
I hope it helps and doesn't confuse you. I told you I would not teach emptiness. I teach this book, only this book. This is the only thing that I teach here. Yeah, Jennifer?
Since we're on the topic of the King of Reasonings, could you kindly help me understand the difference between the autonomous syllogisms of the Svatantrikas and the logical syllogism that is used by Lama Tsongkhapa?
Oh, that's a really difficult topic, because Tsongkhapa thinks there is a difference. Everybody else thinks there is no difference. So you figure it out. Tsongkhapa has one word, two words, Rangwang, in the text of Bhava Viveka, Bhavya. And in this text, Bhavya talks about reasoning under its own power. And so Tsongkhapa takes it to be that this is a reasoning based on assuming the reality of things. Now, everybody else thinks that No, that's not what it means. It means exactly what Tsongkhapa means, meanings just a logical syllogism. That's what Bhavya is using, right? And that's the difference between Tsongkhapa and his opponents. So this is why his opponents say that Tsongkhapa is actually a Svatantrika, not a Prasangika.
Thank you.
Because, and they think that Svatantrika and Prasangika have the same view of emptiness. They don't make a difference that Tsongkhapa makes. But that's the most difficult point in Madhyamaka, in Madhyamaka text, is the discussion between Buddha Palita, Bhava Viveka, and Chandrakirti. The question is whether Chandrakirti got Bhava Viveka right or not. That's a really interesting question as well. All these texts are amazing and really profound, and so they're really difficult to understand, and that's why they give rise to multiple interpretations, which shows that they are really important texts, which texts one can think about again and again, that it's not just one level of understanding, but there are many different possibilities in the text that sense. The Tibetan expression is that these texts are lukgyaden, which means endowed with 100 modes, meaning modes of interpretation. Okay, I think we have confused sufficiently people for tonight.
Professor, I'd like to remind everybody here that our last class will be in 3 weeks on November 2nd. The next class, and it's also the last class, will be on November 2nd.
So we'll do chapter 13, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Good night, Sunny.
Good night, Snay.